I'm so excited you guys came to this particular talk today, and I'm really excited to hear some of what everyone has to say. And I was trying to think of, what I would say before this, but having covered Silicon Valley for a long time, I think there's a growing movement, not just to win and to do well and to kill it or crush it or whatever they say, but I think it's also to live with purpose and live with meaning, and also find businesses that have meaning. And I remember, it kind of struck me. I have a show called Mostly Human, and I did a whole episode called Electric Sheep on, are we addicted to technology and how much control do the algorithms have over us? And I remember I interviewed this guy who has a conference called Wisdom 2.0, and I found him because I had called up the guy who created the iPod, Tony Fadell, who also created Nest. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. And he didn't call me back for days, which is not really like Tony. He's usually like the rest of us, addicted to technology. And he called me back and he's like, no, I was doing my 1 weekend off a month where we just get away from technology for a weekend. I was like, you jerk. You totally addicted us to technology, but you are coming up with this concept of taking a step away, and it's kind of his mindfulness practice that he's doing. And I'm noticing more and more tech leaders are doing that increasingly in Silicon Valley, and I'm assuming, I know this movement is all around the world, with people wanting to be more mindful, wanting to have purpose at work. And I attended, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I attended kind of this off the record, that's what we say in my business, but this off the record meetup at a large tech company where engineers and business leaders and CEOs came, and everybody was trying to find a way to kind of be more mindful and thinking about the products they built. And I told the story earlier, but one guy I mentioned, I met, said he had spent all his time building algorithms to get us to pick up our phone more, and making and coding these products that would get us to be kind of addicted to our phone. And he said, we used to sit around and high five when we realized we got you picking up your phone more than we got you picking up a cigarette. And he's like, and we realized that probably wasn't the best thing. I was like, thanks. And now he's working on a different startup, but he's taking into account a lot of his history, and thinking about what it means to be a good leader and live kind of with purpose. And the guy, have you guys heard of the app called Calm at all? It's like a meditation app. And the entrepreneur who created it said we had a product decision where we could essentially have you, we could say, when you're meditating, so-and-so is also meditating, share this with your friends because that helps with growth. He's like, but that kind of defeats the whole value of the company. So we could grow, and so it was this really interesting kind of decision that was made behind closed doors. So I just thought all that stuff was pretty interesting. And I know you're going to hear all sorts of different things about what it means to be a purposeful leader and finding value in the digital world. And I think the Burning Man Utopia or Dystopia one is particularly interesting to me. I know in Silicon Valley there are a lot of tech leaders who are kind of trying to figure out this delicate balance of creating a world with purpose and meaning, and also taking a step back and knowing what it is to create those types of products. And then I won't keep it too long because I want to make sure we start getting into all the presentations. But when we talk about leadership and purpose, I would say, as someone who covered technology since 2009, I went through a little bit of a soul-searching moment, which I think all leaders do and entrepreneurs, about, I would say, 3 years ago, because I had covered these entrepreneurs who were changing the world, and they were fascinating, and I was the person who would put them on when no one really cared. And now everyone cared. And I felt like we were just scratching the surface. I felt like we were a little too rah-rah, not in a bad way. I thought like they were solving some really interesting problems, but we needed to do more. We needed to challenge more. And I remember being on CNN every day with kind of the news of the day and whatnot, and I didn't feel completely like I had a purpose or a meaning. I felt like that excitement I had over talking about the unknown, it was now known. So what can we talk about that other people aren't talking about? And that's when I started doing my show, Mostly Human, which is literally, I went on the road for 6 months. I took myself off of doing the day of TV stuff, and I really explored some of these larger, more philosophical issues we're facing with technology and society. So for me, that was kind of finding my, that was me being able to think about, what was most important for me career-wise, but also as a journalist, what I thought people would be interested in covering. So I think, you know, consciousness and being aware and all these types of things, the best leaders, the best tech leaders I've interviewed are people who have clarity and perspective, and they're thoughtful. You know, Ev Williams, who founded Twitter, hosts these dinners, these off-the-record dinners. And you just get people jamming. And they're talking about automation in the future and what we have to do and what we should be afraid of and what we should be excited about. So it's great to see people start thinking along these lines, and thinking about, you know, the world we want to live in, not just the one that's being coded right now. So I'm happy you guys are here. I'm going to start slaughtering names right now. So bear with me, and you can just call it out and say, Laurie, that is not how you pronounce the name. But I want to start by introducing our first speaker. He's going to talk about the world we do want to live in, the world we will create. Tomas Björkman, did I say that? How's that? Great. He's an author, he's an entrepreneur, and he's the founder of Ekskäret. So please come on up. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was excellent pronunciation of my name. So I'm Tomas Björkman. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started about 20 companies in IT, property, and in finance. About 10 years ago, I started the foundation, Ekskäret Foundation, the Oak Island Foundation, and I've also written a few books. And my short talk today is going to be based on my book, The World We Create, Världen vi skapar in Swedish. And it's all about the fact that we actually have a much more power to create this world than we usually think about. And that we throughout history has constantly been recreating and creating this world in a very unconscious way, but it's a way that we are just now waking up to. Just want to show you a picture of our wonderful island, Ekskäret. Our foundation has a base out in the island in the archipelago, but also a base in central Stockholm with Ekskäret Klustret, a co-working space where we're trying to gather companies and organizations that all want to be part of co-creating what we sometimes call a more conscious society. The base of the foundation is really in exploring the relationship between our personal inner development and societal change. And this is something that, of course, always have been important, but I think that this is becoming more and more important to look at this, and especially the role our inner development, our consciousness plays in this. In my book, I take the starting point, the technological development, and we've been talking all the day today about this rapid technological development that we are in. My point in the book is that we are moving from a world of scarcity that we've been living in for more than 200,000 years as humans, and that our mind, our brain was really developed for that world. And now we are probably moving into a world of abundance, which should be good news for everyone if we can manage to distribute this abundance. And if we are moving into a world where we might not even have to work, we need to be able to find that new world meaningful and find purpose without work. So that is one aspect, moving from scarcity to abundance. The other aspect is that throughout history, from Stone Age up until today, we have more or less been living in a constant environment, at least during generations. Major technological changes has happened between generations. And now we are living already in a world with constant change. The world is changing rapidly, even within our lifetime. Within my lifetime, at least, I've seen 2 or 3 complete different technological and social environments. So the challenge is that our mind, our brain was developed in a world of scarcity and constant environment, and now we're living in a world of abundance and constant change. And it is essentially the same brain. It's essentially the same hardware that we got. So how are we then able to live in such a completely different world from our evolutionary environment? And the answer there is, of course, that we do not only have our brain, we also have our mind and our society. And one way of putting this could be that the brain is our hardware, that is our computer, whereas our mind is our software. And this software is to a very large extent stored in society. I really zoom out in this book and look at the 13.8 billion years of evolution. And of course, a lot of things has happened in this evolution. Perhaps the most important step during those 13.8 billion years might be the point where life for the first time became conscious and self-conscious. But this little part, the biological part of the evolution, is only a small part. If you take a really large systems perspective, the biological evolution is just a tiny little piece in the middle. First, we had the physical evolution, all the way from Big Bang through particle evolution, atoms, molecules. And then life kicked in, evolution put in a higher gear. Through our becoming conscious, developing language, a cultural evolution kicked in, speeding up evolution even more. Some are talking about genes in the biological evolution and memes in the cultural evolution. And complexity has all through this time been on a steady rise, but right now complexity is more or less exploding. So I argue that we handle this complexity and our changing environment by downloading new programs, new software updates. And we have been having these updates ever since the start of humanity. The software that this picture illustrates, it's more complex than the previous ones. As society developed, we got more and more refined softwares, more and more intellectual innovations to be able to handle our world. Until eventually, today, we are in a really complex social environment and operating a very complex operating system. But the important insight is that this operating system that we are operating today is fundamentally not different from the way our very primitive Stone Age operating systems were operating. And it's not easy for us to see our own operating system. To really step outside the box and try to look at the lens through which we see and operate in our world is very, very difficult. I know that one of the speakers later today will talk about a giant experiment that is going on every year about upgrading our software. It is an experiment where up to 70,000 people try to move outside of our current operating system, move into the desert, try to download a new operating system, and for a week operate within that new system. And this experiment is, of course, called Burning Man. Sometimes throughout history, we are not just updating our operating system a little bit, but we are downloading a completely new operating system. It's like going from Microsoft DOS to Microsoft Windows. In those cases, we are not just changing the systems within society, not only changing the system, but we are changing the way we view ourselves, our society, and our world. And those large shifts we could even then call a paradigm shift. And there are many models to describe these paradigm shifts, and I will not go into any details. I will just say that last time we had such a major update in our world was during the Enlightenment. Then the old paradigm was the medieval way of seeing the world. It was a lens consisting of religion, of superstition, family tradition, that perhaps had its peak some 500 years ago from now. Then suddenly, through technological developments, many different things, but not the least the printing press and other communication ways, this paradigm started to lose power. And we saw a period that was quite disruptive. It was a period of the French Revolution, of the Napoleonic Wars, and it went on for almost 100 years. But out of this chaos, a new emerging paradigm was born, and that was the paradigm of what we today call modernity. Here, our dogmatic religious way of seeing the world was replaced with rational, scientific way of looking on ourselves. And this operating system has, of course, been tremendously successful for us. This is what has given us all new modern medicine. It's given us internet. It's given us democracy. It's given us essentially everything we have today. It's been so successful, this paradigm, that one could almost say that it has been too successful. Many of the problems we see today, if not most of them, are actually problems that we have created ourselves. And the old paradigm, the Enlightenment paradigm, I argue, is a very big cause of these problems. We can speak about the environment, we can speak about world poverty, terrorism. Today, more people die from eating too much than eating too little. Psychological ill health, crashing markets, political system in turmoil. And a lot of people feel insecure and are frightened. I think that what we are seeing in all of these things are not a multitude of crises. I think this is one crisis. I think it's a meta-crisis. And I think it is our paradigm that is starting to lose its power because of technological development. Again, we need to shift paradigm. And this time, the old paradigm is modernity. That had its peak perhaps here in Scandinavia during the 60s and 70s, and are right now starting to lose power. So then the question, of course, becomes, what is the emerging paradigm? What is it that wants to be born now again? And of course, we don't know. We are right in the beginning of this. But there are a lot of people thinking about this, a lot of philosophers, a lot of sociologists, a lot of business people are thinking about this. And of course, just thinking from an entrepreneurial perspective, if we want to stay in business and develop new businesses, trying to have some sort of idea of what this new paradigm might look like could, of course, be very, very valuable. And as I said, I don't know. I paint a picture in my book about possible components of this paradigm, and I will not have time to go into those now. I will just say that I think that this new paradigm has to do a lot with our inner world and with our consciousness. If the Industrial Revolution was based on an acceptance of our limited knowledge of our outer world, and it was through that acceptance and our curiosity about the outer world that we discovered new continents and were able to put a man on the moon. Now I think that the revolution of our time is also about acceptance, this time about accepting the fact that we have very limited knowledge about our inner world. I think that that acceptance of our limited knowledge of our inner world and the discoveries that will come from that will be the major step forward for humanity in our century. So to move from the old paradigm into the new paradigm, we first have to surrender. We have to surrender to the fact that we are not fully developed, that we are on a constantly developing path, both as a society and as individuals. And when we have accepted that, being in touch with ourselves will be an invitation, both to raise our awareness, to grow, and hopefully to become more human. Thank you very much.
I want to ask you one quick question before I let you go.
Sure.
I thought it was interesting, you talked about, at the beginning, you spoke a little bit about how work is going to change, and people will be out of work. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on what will that do to our sense of purpose, and you talk about looking inwards. We are about to see this fundamental change. What do you think that will mean for human beings and how we find purpose?
I think that will both be a question for ourselves, and I know that the speakers later this afternoon will talk about how we need to develop and find an inner compass, and that we need to be able, if our purpose is not given from the outside by a working environment,
right,
that we will need very much more to find the purpose within. And as I said, speakers will later talk about how that is possible. I also think that we will need to develop new structures, new scaffoldings in society that actually helps us to find this new purpose in life, which will always be an individual purpose.
Right.
I think for myself, part of this purpose that I find in life is actually positively contributing to this world that we are constantly creating, knowing that we are constantly part of that creative process. Some in huge, big ways, like the big entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, others in just a small way by raising a family. But we are all contributing to the world that we are constantly creating, and I find that very purposeful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. And our next speaker is going to talk about building purposeful leaders. And I know she has a good idea of how to do that. Selina Millstam, she's head of talent management at Ericsson. So dealing with performance and making sure to retain talent and always kind of having a good idea of what makes a great leader employee. So please welcome. Thanks.
Thanks. Good afternoon. A few years ago, I was on a plane traveling from Stockholm to California, and the gentleman in the seat just on the other side of the aisle next to me had a massive heart attack. I was one of 3 other passengers who performed CPR on this gentleman. We were unsuccessful. When we finally landed in California, the police came on to question a few of us witnesses to understand what happened. And the police asked me, Did you notice anything unusual about him? His behavior? Was his speech slurred? Honestly, I had barely noticed him. I didn't take the time to look at the people around me. So, this afternoon, as we're sitting here in this auditorium, and I like to try to practice this when I'm on the tube or in a conference like this, if you haven't said hello to the people sitting next to you, I invite you to do that, to give a nice smile to anybody sitting next to you, or just with a pleasant hello. Good, so it's interesting because what research says is that 1 in 3 of us don't have a good reason to get out of bed in the morning. 1 out of 3. So if we apply those statistics right now, you can look back at those friendly, smiling faces to your left and to your right. And if they look pretty good and like they have a purpose, maybe it's time for you to do some soul searching, and hopefully this talk will be particularly relevant to you. So who am I? My name is Selina Millstam. I am a people philanthropist. What does that mean? Well, my day job is I'm head of talent management at Ericsson. I also am a founding board member of Giving Wings, which is a foundation that tries to improve the lives of women and children through education. And particularly, we've honed in on women health issues, particularly menstrual health, building to be the best in the world on that. Today, I want to talk about 3 specific things. First of all, a little bit about why purpose is important, what it looks like in organizations, and particularly at Ericsson. And then third, a little bit about my own purpose and how has it served me. And purpose, just to get our bearings on that, can be lots of things. My good friend Richard Leider, he talks about it in an equation. He says purpose is built on your gifts, your values, and your passions. I've heard just the other day Ola Alversen talking about it as the fire in the pit of your stomach. And even on the little tag on my Lipton tea is encouraging me to find magical meaning in my life. It's all around us, has different words. So, help me out here again. If any of what I'm about to say is recognizable to you in the organizations that you're working in or in your actually lives, give a hand up, either hand, and keep them up. We're living in continuously volatile times. We saw that graph and pictures around Brexit, around Trump, around different fires, earthquakes, tornadoes, floods happening around the world. It's an uncertain time. There's many things we actually don't know what will happen. It's complex. The challenges we're facing, they're not black and white anymore. They're significantly more complicated. And in the world we live in today, the future, what it's going to look like, is ever more ambiguous. Do you recognize any of that in your organization? Well, then I think that for the most of us, we agree that that's an area where we agree with. So get your hands up. I want to see like that we really, for those of you who this relative. And then, so how do we deal with this, living in this ambiguity? And one thing that I want to tip to give you right now is to lean over and actually tickle your neighbor under your arm. No, I'm actually just kidding. But I do want to give that the power of laughter is a great way to manage through the VUCA environment. So we all agree that we're living in this complex world. And in the organizations, it's ever more challenging in terms of where we're going, what's the strategy we should take, changing leadership and direction. But as leaders, we're still being required to make fast, accurate decisions. Our teams are still coming to us and say, where do I go? What should I do? it's quite a dilemma that we face. And basically, in a VUCA environment, we have to figure out how to be able to bounce back quickly as leaders. So how do we do that? We need to be resilient. We heard that word a lot this morning, resilience. And what does resilience actually mean? It means that we're able to actually come back and get that energy to go through things. And that skill of self-renewal is going to be a critical skill for us all to develop, and hopefully for you all to develop. Otherwise, those 500 emails waiting for you after a full day of not being at work will bury you. So, where does resilience come from? Well, this is about the power of purpose. And neuroscience research is converging, and they agree that purpose, having that key area to why I get up in the morning, significantly helps us to be more resilient. Nietzsche said, "He who has why to life can bear almost anything. He who has why to live for can bear almost anything." So only true resilience comes from purpose. So purpose in organizations. If we know that resilience and purpose is key to exceptional performance, and that is around people, and people build organizations, at least for right now, we know that it's actually critical to organizations. And I'm fortunate enough to be in an organization where indeed purpose and resilience is seen as very important and something that we do quite a bit of things to actually support. And my friend Jan will talk a little bit later actually about the importance of this congruence. So being aligned in the organizations we work in big ones like Ericsson, or perhaps the small startups that you're a part of, being entrepreneurs. We still need to make sure there's congruence with who we are, our purpose, and our values, and those values of the organizations we're part of. So we get a nice cornerstone here, a building block at Ericsson, where Lars Magnus and Hilda Ericsson, over 140 years ago, started an organization to connect people around the world. Connectivity being a critical purpose. And in the past, and this year, we actually have put that to the next level, and we have, for the first time, formally talked about a purpose for our organization, which is to innovate technology for good. At the end of the day, what that means is that we are using technology and connectivity to make lives better. It feels really cool to be part of an organization like that. Another thing that we do is we offer individuals opportunities to be involved in social impact events, activities, initiatives. So we have Connect to Learn, which is really us being out in rural areas and creating connectivity so children who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity for education can get it. We're guided and committed to the UN goals, and our Ericsson response deploys both employees and telecom equipment to crisis situations, particularly relevant in the past few months where we've been in different tornado and flood areas. For those employees who've been able to participate in that activity, that work has been life-changing and added greater inspiration and motivation to be a part of an organization that supports them to give back. Finally, we try to actually create and innovate products and services, not only for a commercial benefit, but also to have a positive impact from a social, economic, environmental perspective. Really trying to create change in the business models and work that we're doing. Finally, for us purpose-driven leaders, ethical, inclusive leaders are so important that we have integrated them into virtually all of our learning and development experiences that we have for leaders across the organization. Because we believe that these purpose-driven, ethical, inclusive leaders are truly the ones that will help us manage what Tomas talked about and what VUCA is all about, navigating through a VUCA environment. So, that has been purpose and organization, and the organization that I work in with Ericsson. But many of you who are here in Sweden will know that being a leader at Ericsson, possibly, to be honest, hasn't been that easy over the past 18 months. We've had changes in our CEOs, we've had profit warnings, we've had 2 significant organizational changes, and we have had the media who has scrutinized us frequently, unfairly. But that's how it goes. So how do I stay resilient as a leader in this organization? First of all, of course, I have some key cornerstones of my own. My family, my generous husband, and my really cool kids. They keep it real. You know, when things get too serious, help me to use that strategy of laughing. The second one is my team. I work with a group of very committed, hardworking, amazing, supportive individuals. Some of them are here today, and I promise you, if you get the chance to meet them, they're worth spending some time with. The third is my tribe. And in the very sense of tribe, those who I like to sit around the metaphorical fire with. Their friends and their colleagues, past, present, and likely future, who push me to do more than I actually thought was possible. Important people. But the fourth thing is the most critical, and that is my sense of my own purpose. And with that guiding light, that fire in my stomach, that sense of meaning, I have been able to maintain my resilience. The way that I've articulated my purpose is to help others to get to the top of their tree so that they can enjoy the view. For me, this has very emotional and actually almost a physical response to what it means. And in times when I have had really tough time thinking about, with all the change happening in the organization I'm a part of, how do I lead my team? How do I come up with the answers? How do I actually manage myself, my own self-awareness, my own resilience? This has helped me every time. Even those few occasions when I was the one having difficulty to get out of bed, to get back and get into the fight, it served me every time. So with that, a little bit about me, I thought I'd offer a few tidbits of perhaps reflection for you all. So one of the things that I really recommend and that I have found really helpful for me is to find that place. And it doesn't need to actually be a physical place, but it's where do I rejuvenate? Where do I get my energy? As a leader at Ericsson, we talk about making sure you get your own oxygen mask on first, and then you can help those around you. So make sure you're clear about where you get your energy, where you go to let go. And I happen to just love this painting. It's done by a friend of mine, so it was really inspiring to me even when I wanted to think about talking about this. So at the end of the day, there's a catch with the purpose thing, because purpose is actually only really useful if it's purposeful. What does that mean? That means you have to use your purpose to actually make decisions. What are the organizations you choose to be a part of? Who are the people you choose to spend time with? Do they enable you to live your purpose and be the best version of yourself? So finally, if I think about what has inspired me and helped me in a simple way, there are 3 questions that I want to leave you with. And hopefully, as you're reflecting on today, the whole day in its entirety, and what you're taking and remember it, they will serve you in defining or refining or just getting to the heart of what really gets you out of bed in the way that they've served me. So the first question is, what do you stand for? What is it you really believe in? What are you going to go the extra mile for? The second one is, what don't you stand for? What will you not accept? Particularly important issue right now, given social media activity. And the third, during good times and during tough times, and there will be tough times, whom do you stand with? What do you stand for? What don't you stand for? Whom do you stand with? Thank you for standing with me today.
Great. I love what you said about how we all just had to look at each other. The biggest thing I struggle with, I live in New York, we're all on the subway, and we're all just sitting here like this. Yeah. And every so often, you put your head up and you smile at someone, it's like this magical moment. I know we're running a teeny bit behind, but I wanted to ask you, you seem like you really have it together. Like, I just want you to say nice things because it's amazing. I'd be curious to know, and I can see that because you have to lead people, and you're kind of an inspiring person for all the employees you work with. During this tough time, and it sounds like this was a really tough time for the company, and you talk about resilience. What was the most challenging part for you, and what do you think you kind of took away from being resilient during this particular time?
I think it has to do with this VUCA environment and the expectations that are even higher. That the reality is, in times of complexity and uncertainty, teams, they actually really do need more guidance. And more than very specifics, they need to know that somebody is there with you, like walking together. And to be honest, when you're tired and you're feeling a little frustrated as well, at least I felt I really actually had to be very conscious about saying, okay, now I'm in it. And not in an unauthentic way, because people, they kind of smell it. They catch it on you if you're bullshitting them. But in a really authentic way, I guess, standing with the team and walking with them and genuinely saying, it's going to be okay. We're going to do this if we do it together.
Cool. I'm going to put you on speed dial. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So our next speaker is going to talk about the skills we need to create and learn, especially in this changing digital world, where I think there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of change happening very quickly. So I want to get right to her. Carolyn, this is where I'm going to do it, you guys, and just correct me if I'm wrong. Carolyn Stiernstedt Sahlborn? How is that? Okay. Well, guys, she's the CEO of Ekskäret. So I'm going to have her come up and say out loud how she should actually say her name, and you guys can all laugh at me.
Don't worry.
Tell everyone how you say your name, too.
Okay. I'm not telling you my name yet. I'm just making you some curious first. Give me your 5-year plan. Demand it. Why can't you? I have no energy for this anymore. I don't know where we're heading. This said a coworker to me, trying to navigating change in one organization. That was tough, both for me and for that person. Six months ago, I met Hannah Dawood. Hannah Dawood is an Egyptian entrepreneur. She has founded For No-Nos, which means for babies. Every week, she has 2 to 3 million active parents on her site in Egypt, seeking for good advice, buying toys, buying nutrition food. She's nominated as being one of the 500 most needed business ideas in Africa. We met through a leadership program, trying to find out what her next step is in order for her to grow her company. But really, early in the beginning, I could sense she wasn't happy. She didn't know what strategic decision she had to make in order for her to scale up. But after the program, she came to me, almost with tears in her eyes. Now I know why I do what I do. And of course, with those words, I know why I do what I do. So my name is Caroline Stiernstedt Sahlborn. Never mind the last name, but remember Caroline. 1 month ago, I had a conversation with one of Sweden's leading business psychologists. And she told me, Caroline, you know what? I've stopped sending leaders to any more traditional leadership courses. They don't help. Why? The only thing that helps are tools for inner growth. Tools that can help us flourish as human beings. What she's talking about the tools that can help us navigate. Tools that can help us deal with complexity, deal with uncertainty, deal with how we co-create together. Because it's only then that we can grow our company, our organizations, and ourselves sustainable. So what is an emerging leadership? What do we mean by that? Can we solve our problems with the same level of mindsets as we have created them? That was a quote from Einstein, not from me. Probably not. More and more leaders have found out that we actually cannot solve these problems with the same level of mindsets. More and more leaders have found out that we are not equipped with the skills that we need. Sorry, Selina, but the world looks a little bit different for us as workers in these big companies. We're trying to do 3 years plans or 5 years plans, but they're not working. We're trying to set up clear goals, not working. We have endless of emails, super many meetings, and we are experts in multitasking. You know, when we have these international phone calls, many of us prefer them to take them at home. Why? Well, because we can write emails, do the analysis in our head, nourish the flowers, cook foods, and if really good, as I am, I can speak to the kids at the same time. Do you recognize? A few? Yes? So what is it? If we have an idea, many of our leaders says, step up, go for it, act independently, but not too independent. You need to be aware of the corporate values and principles. We read endless of management books on happiness, on how to be a successful leader. We are overwhelmed with things that we can do on our spare time to fulfill ourselves. And yet, many of us are not happy. Many of us are not satisfied the way we perform or how others performs. So what is it? Is it so that we try to solve our challenges with more information? Maybe we need transformation instead of information. Maybe we need to look at the world and collectively adapt to the world we have in front of us. It's really hot in here. Before I was freezing, now I'm hot. I have spoken to many leaders and worked with many organizations all over the world. And what I can see, the problem is not that we lack the traditional competence. The challenge for us is to dare to stay in the pain that comes with challenges. To truly understand the system in which we are operating in. Truly understand those that says no. Why do they say no? What's behind the no? But also to be open for the emerging future. Competence means our ability to solve problems. Do we have those abilities? Yes. And I think you can see that both from what Tomas was saying and what Selina was saying. We have the abilities, but in different degrees. But the cool thing is that if we spend part of our time to be self-reflective, we increase our level of awareness and we can grow. So what we have done is that we have, together with a lot of researchers and experts from adult development, motivational psychologists, neuroscience, we have found 5 essential human skills that can help us grow, deal with complexity, and become better in co-creating with others. So now you're really curious. So give me those 5. You're thinking, yes. The first one is openness. Have you been listening to me? Do you see me? Do you sense me? Do you sense that I've been a little bit nervous about this? Do you sense those beside you? Or have you already made up your mind when I came up here that what she's talking about is nice but is not relevant? To be open is the first skill for entering a positive change and become more self-reflective. Actually, it's that shown that the key factor behind leadership failure is lack of openness and lack of listening. We're not present. We're not there to truly understand what's going around us, both outside and inside us. We need to truly be there to have things to come, but also to let go of what these things that needs to be let go of. The second thing we need in order to handle change it's compassion. Because change is painful. Change can be tough. But with compassion, we can develop a new strength. Compassion means that we actually also are willing to act on the suffering of what I have, sense, feel, and what others feel and sense. So the first thing we need to be aware of when we practice compassion is to be noticeable about our own self-criticism. How do I dare to take on challenges? How do I look at mistakes? Do I see mistakes as failure or as learning? How do I look at others' mistakes? If they do mistake, do I say, okay, you're out? Or do I see it when we make mistake, I can bring on challenges because I know next time maybe we learn from this one. And accept. Can we accept each other that we are not all perfect? I am not perfect. I have already missed a lot of things which I'm supposed to say. That's okay. Maybe you will go away with here with something else instead. How do I accept the failure of others? But also, do I dare to help out, to assist in change, in the suffering of others, in the suffering of myself? The third skill that we need to deal with change, to handle uncertainty, deal with complexity, is our ability to take many perspectives. Handling perspectives, training in perspectives, is really to seek for more information. Dare to stay a little bit longer in the uncertainty. Truly understand the system where I am and see what other perspectives are there. When the people who are in minority before a decision, what wisdom do they have that I don't have, that I am curious about? So perspective taking there is one key or factor that's been shown that's been good for good leadership. It's the ability to take many perspectives. So we can be good in leading others by being open, by being compassionate, by being able to be truly understanding the complexity in my organization. But sometimes we lack the skill of leading ourselves. We don't know why we don't feel motivated. We don't know what is triggering me. What's my purpose? Why is this important for me? And that has to do with the fourth skill, which is to lead yourself. Who are you? What are your values? What is important to you? How can you be an authentic leader? So connect your values to a concrete situation that is important for you. What is your competence? Not what other things what others say that it's important for you, but what's important for you. Because when we understand that, we start to also motivate ourselves, and we can see that for me to be authentic and to understand myself also is connected what I can contribute with to the rest. So self-leadership is a needed skill, I think, especially in these ever-changing organizations that we have. The fifth skill that we have identified is sense-making. How do we make sense of the reality we have there? As Thomas was saying, with Trump, with Brexit, with Syria, with the real estate crisis, with digitalization. How do we make sense of it? How do we make sense of our own, maybe family situation? And that is a skill that we can practice and we can learn. And through sense-making, my well-being and my ability to fully contribute to my relationships in the workplace and in the society increase. I learned to reintegrate my experience and to find my new map. I don't have to navigate on old maps. I can navigate on new maps, which I have been part of drawing. So with SelfLeaders, I found my new compass. And then with sense making, I can find my new map. And remember Hannah, the Egyptian entrepreneur. What she hasn't previously understood was how her business idea had come about. But when she understood it has to do with her childhood, she got clarity and energy and could see what decisions she had to make in order for her to grow her company. She understood that through her childhood, she had sensed something that she didn't want to go forward or bring to anyone else. She was brought up in a family where she wasn't allowed to laugh or have joy at once. So when she came forward to me with tears in her eyes, it was because she realized that she wasn't happy. She didn't laugh at any time during her childhood. The only thing that mattered in her family was grades. So she founded For Nonos, for educate parents about good childhoods, about the importance of playing, the importance of nutrition. Then she could make the right strategic choices for her. And she's right now entering Saudi Arabia. So I'm quite proud. So to become an emerging leader, we must allow ourselves to grow with new insights. Consciousness is our insights. And when we create new insights, we can take more responsibility and we can act. And when we act, and if we reflect on our acting, we learn. And when we learn, we grow, and when we grow, we become wiser. The skills, openness, all of these are our tools, our means to handle complexity, our means to make better decisions, our means to create more insights so that we can grow and understand and be in this digitalized world with more responsibility. Are you really confused now? Am I making sense? Yes? Good. But I want to leave you with something concrete, because I know that many of you will ask, how do I start? Give me something that I can walk away from here. And for many, it starts with a crisis. We get divorced. Our company are in a crossroads. We get promoted. We get fired. Our teams are not working. For me, it started out with a combination of a 30-plus crisis together with a company that went bankrupt, and then I suddenly entered Ekskäret. And you know, entering Ekskäret, talking about personal growth, I thought that I knew everything about change, working with leaders all over the world. And then seeing that every therapist, every business management consultant that I saw wanted to give me their best idea, wanted to test on me. So I'm like, okay, so I was thrown into a lot of good things. But I also ended up saying, you know, oh, and I got obsessed with knowing my dark sides. I thought that is the only thing I have to learn. I have to really understand what is my shadow sides. So finally, I got to sit in that therapist that you have to see. You know, a nice chair. He sits and he looks at you. You tell your story. He's asking why you're here. And I'm like, you know, I truly, truly need to understand my dark sides. What are they? How can you help me? I know I was super prepared for digging deep, for start crying. And he just turned to me and said, you know, Caroline, you're very mentally, you need to go down in your body. Stop using your brain. So I think we all can learn, we can grow. But we have to start with our daily exercises. How can we become self-reflective? How can we keep on with our curiosity? How can we live life fully? For some, it starts with being more aware that you need to laugh, be with your family. For some, it starts with the practice of being present or being more compassionate. But remember, changing structure, meaning starting with understanding your building blocks. Your building blocks are yourself. Start with yourself. Why do you do what you do? Why do you do what you do? So at Ekskäret, we offer many programs, many dialogues. As Thomas was saying, my colleague, my partner Jan will also enter here. So join us, hang out with us, and we can together, curious, explore the world together. Thank you.
I'm going to get right to, I have so many questions for you, but I don't know if I have time, so I'm going to get to our next speaker.
I'm really tired.
And by the way, remember what she said about forgiveness when it comes to naming names. So thank you. You helped redeem me. Our next speaker, I'm personally very excited about. How many of you guys have been to Burning Man? Cool. All right, one person. So there's a lot of work here. He's the founder of Makerspark. It's a 3D print shop. He's also someone that has spoken quite a bit about digital transformation. And I'm not going to screw up the name. It's Gustaf Josefsson Tadaa, right? Tadaa. Okay. All right, so please welcome him. He's going to talk Burning Man, Utopia or Dystopia. Thank you.
Ta-da! Okay, so we're doing this consciousness, mindfulness, and shit. So kind of, can you guys stand up? I just need you for a second, because we've been sitting down too much. So we're going to do some yoga, because that's good for you, right? So we're going to start by doing this, and then you put your hands together, and then you push them up past your chest, and then you push it up, and then you bring your hands down. And unfortunately, that's all the yoga I know. Thank you. You can sit down again. Yeah, remembering our bodies when we do this. So it completely changed the way I relate to myself and others. A newfound friend of mine said this to me last week. She is in her late 20s, very intelligent, well-educated. She's got a great job. She's emotionally mature, having spent a lot of time with personal development, with mindfulness, with self-leadership. And this is what she said, that something completely changed her. She said that it was like she had acquired knowledge and information over time, but it was not until this very moment that she could finally integrate it and start to live it. All this time and effort, all this information gathered, but it wasn't the information she was looking for, it was the transformation. And this transformational experience seems to be key to personal development. It's not just the tools, it's not just the knowledge, it's not just the courses and the exercises we do, but there are these moments in time where we change from one state to another. And we try to design for this. I mean, there are courses, we do retreats, education to transform people. But the story she's telling was different. She was at a small event, 200 people in the woods, in the middle of Sweden, 3 weeks ago. And this event wasn't designed. It was not meant to create this experience. It was not written as such. It was allowed to emerge. This event is a part of a network of a couple of hundreds events across the world, out of which, there's been a half a dozen in Sweden just in the last year. And it's the events, the experiences, the ideas and principles that builds upon Burning Man. Welcome home. Welcome home. That is the first thing that greets you as you pass the door. Someone stops your car, they pull the door open, they pull you out and they give you a hug and they say, welcome home to this city, Black Rock City. This is where the participatory or the co-created festival Burning Man takes place. It started about 30 years ago with 300 people on a beach and one guy who, set a man on fire. People liked it. They did it again next year. The more people came, they brought more art, more music and expression. And the third year, what everyone remembered was this sculpture of the man that was set on fire. So it was called the Burning Man. And now, 30 years later, every year at the end of August, 70,000 people from all across the world gather in the northern Nevada desert to build a city together. And everything here is created by the participants themselves. So the organizers just say, here we build, and everything you see is created by the participants themselves on their own initiative. So they themselves have to come up with, what do I want to create? And solve the project management, the logistics, the fundraising, the building, the construction, the maintenance, and the deconstruction and the cleaning to be able to build their dream. Thousands of pieces of art, thousands of bars and restaurants and massage parlors or workshop studios where you can go to learn about quantum physics or blockchain, or why not practice BDSM? Whatever takes your fancy. And it all comes from what we dream of. A temple that becomes a screen on which we can project all that which we believe in. So a place that acknowledges the human capability of creating holiness, of creating God. And over the course of a week, every square inch of these walls are cluttered with messages to people you miss, to yourself, to someone who passed away, altars from all kinds of religions. And by the end of the week, under silence, all the holiness that we have created, we let go of. So instead of building top-down, structurally, hierarchically planned, Burning Man builds on values, 10 principles. So for example, gifting. You're not allowed to buy or sell or trade or market at Burning Man. You're only allowed to give. You're asked to figure out what you love to give to other people and then come there to give as much as possible of that. If you walk up to a bar and you say, hey, can I have a beer? And I'm like, yeah, sure, you can have a beer. That's not because it's free or sponsored or whatever. It's because some dude bought beer, lugged it out into the desert, built a bar, only to stand there and be able to say, you're welcome. And when we leave, we all clean up after ourselves. Actually, we never make it dirty in the first place. We leave no trace. If you so much as have a cigarette, you put that cigarette in your box, in your pocket, so you can take it back to your camp, to your garbage bag, in your car, so you can bring it home. Because it's your trash. Let's try to do that at way out west or whatever next year. Hey, this year we're going to clean up after ourselves. That doesn't even work at this event. And radical self-reliance. You are responsible for you. You're responsible to take care of yourself, your own needs, your water, your food, your shelter, your safety, your physical self, and your psychological self is your primary responsibility. You know, building nightclubs in 3 stories like a coliseum with ladders that go out over the audience 5 meters high with chains hanging under them. And you can climb up there and you can hang over the audience and no one's going to tell you you can't. And still, for some weird reason, we have less accidents than any other festival of comparable size. At Burning Man, we've found a way to break out of the box that confines us. What we do, literally, is take people's reality and break it apart. Burning Man is a transformation engine. We take people out to this vast, dry place, nowhere, very harsh conditions. It strips away their luggage, the things they brought with them, of who they thought they were. And it puts them in a community setting where they have to connect to each other in a place where anything is possible. In doing so, it breaks their old reality and helps them realize that they can create their own. Spoken by Michael, one of the original founders of Burning Man. So this is large-scale transformational experiences happening. And these stories, like I was completely changed, I can keep telling on and on and on of friends and people I've met that have shared these stories with me. Like myself, I've been to 25-something Burning Man events across the world. I built this Viking ship in 2012. We were 300 people standing around it as we set it on fire, and we were all singing Rövarvisan från Ronja Rövardotter. You know, it's my friend Daniel, dressed up as Viking, a plastic bike helmet and some plush reindeer horns. Why? Like, why? What's the point? This doesn't make sense. Is this a transformational experience, really? But transformational experiences is something deeply individual. I mean, it doesn't get more personal, more individual than that, and it changes. If you take it to the Nordic countries, to Borderland, the Nordic Burning Man event, or if you take it to Stockholm, to Urban Burn, which I founded in Nobelberget in Sickla. These transitions are individual because it is among the most complex things that we try to address as a part of our journey. I believe that the purpose of society is to further the psychological development of every citizen. And in doing that, we have to scale up transformational experiences. And you can't simply do that by thinking that you figured it out and planned something. Because the diversity of impression, the diversity of experiences that will reach just that person in just that moment is far too complex for us to think out in any structured or designed way. Instead, we need to create these containers where people can be allowed to step out and start co-creating their own journeys towards these transformational moments and co-curating each other's transformational moments. And really, kind of paradoxical, me standing here right now. You know, because if we want to scale up the transformational, the personal development of society, there's only so much that a priest in a pulpit can do. I work as a professional speaker, which is, you know, I got to make a living, but I dearly hope that the idea that one person with hubris should be standing here taking 15 minutes, or with 200 people, 50 man-hours, just for the pleasure of having you listen to my voice, when you could be taking these steps yourself, asking those questions to each other about what you long for, what you dream of, what you are passionate about. So that's what I'd like to ask you to start. Not by going to Burning Man or Borderland, but taking the next moment with the next new person and be curious of what their journey is heading. Thank you. You want me up
there? I know. How many people want to go to Burning Man now? I definitely do. I know we have to get to our last speaker. I think there's an interesting idea there of getting uncomfortable. I bet the second you walk in there and your phone's not working and someone gives you a massive hug, all of us are kind of like, oh my God, what's happening? And I think there's something special about that discomfort and how it forces us to kind of live a little bit and live authentically. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Our last speaker, he's going to talk. I think it's a cool way to end because we've had so many inspiring people talk today. By talking about the sense of personal purpose and our individual values in the workplace and how that manifests itself. So I will waste no time. Jan, Artem, Henriksson, he's the founders of SelfLeaders. Please come up. Thank you.
So for the last 8 years, I've been reading a lot of science, teaching at Stockholm School of Economics. This October, we're at Harvard speaking about values and motivation. And when you nerd for so long time in one subject, you always get the question, Jan, what motivates you? What's your drive? Why are you doing this? And when I do some soul searching, I have to admit, many times, the root is in a big sense of confusion on how to lead myself, on how to navigate, and how to take decisions. I will share one slide of research with you that I think is of huge importance for us to understand ourselves and understand how to drive change and big change that we many times long for. If there would be a Nobel Prize in psychology, I think the professors Deci and Ryan would get it. They were the founders of self-determination theory, the theory that explains why we do what we do. And after I showed you the slide, I will invite you to do an exercise to get curious about yourself and each other. One of the exercises that we did with top 300 leaders at Ericsson, top leaders at Spotify, and what we taught at Harvard. Does that sound meaningful? Yes? Okay, let's go. So, when we drive change, let's say environmental change or cultural change that we want to do, many times we focus on the external world, on what will happen if we do or don't do this. When I motivate myself, I sometimes think about this. If I don't prepare this speech, this will happen. But there is a scale, and the more we can lean towards and motivate ourselves by internal motivation, the more creative we will be, the more grit we will have, and the better we'll cooperate with other people. So the next step would be, okay, I'm not worrying about the consequences, but I'm worrying about if I don't do this, I will feel bad about myself, or in front of my boss or colleague or somebody else. So we're getting closer towards inner sense. We of course want to go to a sense of meaning. Gamification has been a lot about this. Values work has been much more and more trying to see how can we make values in organizations fun. But what Desi and Ryan say is, if we are serious about working with values and purpose in our organizations, we have to go to the last step. And we have to look for and work with personal values. And for so many years, company leaders that I spoke with have been trying to close their eyes for the complexity that each individual also has values. We have said, okay, we want to work with our company values, we want to get people aligned, but we haven't really taken it seriously that each individual has values, and how do we handle that? How do we help people be their best self and at the same time contributing to what we'll do together? So we've been working with a metaphor that we've been calling for the values tree at SelfLeaders. I'm one of the co-founders together with Dick and Dominic von Martens. And the tree can symbolize from our basic needs, which are different for each individual. Maslow was very wrong. To our stem, what is our self-fulfillment? To our contribution values, what do we want to contribute with? And here we're going to do an exercise, which is one of the most powerful exercises that I have learned from leadership development, and I hope you want to spend 10 minutes doing that. So if we could get some light into the space, and I would like you to bring up your phones, but only for one reason, and that is to go into app.selfleaders.com and get your values tree up. We did that as a preparation for today, most of us. If you haven't done it, don't stress. Just raise your hand. You will get a paper with some value words, so you can still take part in the exercise. If you have done it from your mobile phone, your values tree should show up directly. And if not, you will need to log in with your email and password. And if you can see your values tree, then you're set. If you have some kind of tech problems or have not done this, raise your hand, you get a paper, and I will soon go through the exercise and how we can learn something about ourselves and maybe a neighbor. If you're sitting alone, please move to a person so we have a friend. We need to be sitting 2 and 2, say hi to each other. You'll get about 30 seconds, 1 minute to pair up and find somebody that you're curious about in the room. Okay, so while we get settled and some of us are getting our papers, I'll go through the exercise. If you by any chance don't get access to a paper or your phone, you will still be able to do this. This is a vision exercise. It will be a bit harder if you haven't done the preparation, but it's still possible to work with this spot on. So what will happen is, this is my values tree. Communication is something that is really dear to me, and working with that. And many times we get our values from our experience, from our history. And there is a great value in doing some soul searching and understanding where our values come from, so we can be more grounded, more resilient, more authentic, because leadership is a lot about authenticity. That's how we build trust. But there is also huge value in reflecting what is our dream, what is our purpose, where do we want to go. If I could create my life in any way that I can, how would I choose to create it? And this is an exercise from Purpose and Action module that we did at Harvard that I will invite you to experience. So I would ask you to start in the foundation of your tree. If you have a paper, just look at some values there and see what value speaks to you. And then work yourself through the tree, going to the middle and up to the branches, what you would like to contribute with. And for each value, I would ask you to visualize a situation of how you would like to express or experience that value. And here, in Sweden especially, I will ask you not to say, oh, someday I maybe would like to have a little bit more discipline and get a little bit better at this or that. This is Christmas. You can dream big and go crazy. Be American. Let's get inspired by Selina here. She's awesome, I think. And then when you talk about the greater good values, please remember not to just talk about what you would like to experience, but also visualize how would you like the world to be. So the other person just practice active listening and curiosity. And be a cheerleader. See if you encourage the other person to really get in touch with what is truly important and dream big. I'll do a short demo. So basically, if I could dream today, first of all, I wake up and I go up directly when my alarm calls. I'll be so disciplined that I'll just jump out of bed, I go for a run, I go for a swim. And when I meet my girlfriend, there's lots of joy. We laugh at the breakfast. When I go into the bus driver has turned into an Italian bus driver and says, welcome, and he hugs people. And people suddenly turn into very physical beings. We hug each other, we kiss each other. The Nordics has become like Italy. Everybody are hugging and touching each other. And when I get to work, I really take the lead together with my team, and we challenge the old perspectives in leadership. We challenge the old ways of working with values. But also when we talk with each other, there is an awareness. I can see that people are there, that they are there emotionally. There is a presence that creates the possibility to really co-create and see each other in the moment, to work together, to try to think about what is really wise here. How can we create perspectives that are 50-year visions ahead, 100-year visions, where we use the research in politics, in our companies, to really create something more sustainable and develop the structures in a way that is wise. That's a spontaneous way of me dreaming according to my values. And I would like you to just take 4 minutes each, turn to your neighbor and give it your best shot and talk about your values, your dream, and just be present and see if you can listen to each other. Can we do that? And I'll tell you when to switch. So just go for as long as you can, and then I'll tell you, okay, half the time has gone, and then you switch. Let's do this. So round off and switch. Half the time has gone. Round off and switch. The other person can talk for 3 minutes. So start rounding off. So this is just a short experiment to get you started. I agree deeply with the fact that we have a very limited knowledge of ourselves. And we learn about ourselves by testing, by prototyping, by reflecting, and by playing with it, by being in contexts and environment that are playful, and when we can get to learn other people, hear about their dreams and their stories, but also express others, express our own. Our vision at SelfLeaders is a world where we're all leaders, where we're all agents, where we do what we want to do because it's who we are, because it's consistent with our values. And if we look at adult development theory, one of the most important things for us as human beings to move from a mindset that is socialized, where we're trying to protect our image or get into the traps of becoming controlling or protecting or pleasing, which are the three most common leadership mistakes, is that we need to get in touch with our values, live them, and in order to do that, we need to be seen for our values from others. In the start, we need other people to see who we are and what is important for us. And this is why we have started our sister company, Values Match. Philip Johnson Jarl is the CEO, a brilliant person here in the room and will be outside, to connect people who share values, the same things that we care deeply about. And we invite you to take part in this experiment. We tested this out at Harvard. Our first client was Stockholm School of Economics, their mentorship program. But there are big companies like a huge telecom organization that says, let's match our people up and find true friendship, authentic connection, so that we can support each other in growing. And yes, we need to be challenged by other perspectives, But today, sometimes we have too much of that in our destructive world. And we need to also be able to rest and connect with somebody when we feel this soulmate connection. Like, yes, we understand each other, we both value wisdom. Or for me, I was talking about intimacy. I was practicing full contact kung fu for many years and thought that I enjoyed that until I realized that I actually just wanted human touch. Contact improvisation was much more fun once I understood that, but it took me 15 years to realize that intimacy was important with all the stereotypical ideas of what it is to be a man, to be a guy, especially from Ukraine. So what we want to do is, if you have done or can do your values tree, we will pair you up this evening and send an email to somebody at the Sime conference, 2 of you sharing values and saying, connect, go out for lunch, have a coffee, and just see what values you share, talk about your stories and where you are different, and see what happens and what you can learn from that. Throughout the 8 years, we have done more than 20,000 people with this values methodology in leadership development. And now our aim is to create more connection, more authenticity in our relationships. And now we're testing it out at conferences and in mentorship programs. But starting 2018, our aim will be to transform the dating market. We think it's so superficial. And there's so many friends and myself when I was single that has been in pain of meeting people and not connecting deeply, where you just evaluate each other. And doing something where we can help each other grow, when we can connect truly, and when we can be in our center, both in our roots, living what is true for us, but also contributing to others. We hope you want to do that experiment with us, and we hope that once you get the email and saying, here is your buddy, if you can be first in the room to respond and write to that person, whatever his or her gender, age, you will have no clue. Just say, hey, let's meet up. Let's go out for lunch. Thank you very much.
I'm going to try to race up here, not slip. Okay. Thank you so much. That was awesome. I like what you said about Kung Fu and how you just wanted human touch. When did you come to that realization?
4 years ago.
Did you get like punched really hard and you were like, I just need a hug?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you
Some
very
people
much.
are slow, you know. Some people are fast learners. I'm really slow. So.
Well, what I think is great there is that's also like a very vulnerable thing to say. And I think something that I can take away from a lot of the leaders that have spoken, there's a certain vulnerability in being honest about who you are. And when you want to live with purpose. So I'm not one to preach on that because Lord knows I'm trying to get away from my phone a little bit more and spend time finding deep connections. But I think that's a beautiful point. So I'm glad you found,
It's a foundational value for me, vulnerability.
Great.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm going to bring Carolyn back for 1 second just to make an announcement. And I hope you guys had a great time today, and thanks for being a captive audience. And I love this idea of living with authenticity and trying to figure out who exactly you are and constantly challenging yourself to do that. I know that's a constant battle for me in my work, too, and for me as an individual. So we have one announcement. And I'm bringing her back because I messed up the name before, so I just have to end on a high note.
Just call me Caroline.
Great.
We created Sime Consciousness 2 years ago together with Sime, Ekskäret. And therefore, we would actually like all of you who are here only for the Sime Consciousness, you are most welcome to stay the full afternoon. You don't have to buy any more tickets or whatever. We actually give you that opportunity. So stay, joy, and please connect with us again, because we truly believe that we would like to do Sime Consciousness at more times, because we think this subject is something for us. We have just started the conversation about what is consciousness, how do we change mindsets, how do we create more awareness, how do we grow. So that is a subject that we would like to reconnect with all of you who are here, but also bring more people next time. So for you who wants to stay, welcome to stay. We give you those opportunities. Otherwise, see you next year.
Great. And everyone back at like 2:30, so quick coffee break and then back. Bye, guys.